Hello. So this is Saturday night. We're in San Diego, and we're doing a question and answer for the conference that we're having. And so the energy has been really great so far. It's really fascinating doing this level of work, and there's lots of questions. So what we try to do, for those of you on Facebook, you can type your question in. Is that right, Roxanne?
Yeah.
So if you have a question as we're going along, type it in. Roxanne will comment, raise it as we kind of go through this. But there's about 700 people sitting behind the camera. I can hear them all. This is a very Some of them are quieter than others, but that's how it is. So, a number of the questions that came up so far over the last 2 days, and so some of them we pushed off till tonight, so everybody can listen to them. So, where would you like to start? To all of the 700 people in the audience. What would you like to know? And let me explain. Dan's got a microphone, so he's going to hand that to you, so that way the recording picks all this up comfortably. I'll also repeat the question if necessary. So, what would you like to know? Joe,
I'll start. Jim, how do you see your new book working in with the rest of the Mastering Alchemy work?
The new work, the new book?
Yeah.
Here's your $5. Well, thank you, Joe. That was
The first thing I thought of.
That's exactly the right question. So, for some of you who don't know, we just published a book actually a week and a half or 2 weeks ago, and it's a course in Mastering Alchemy. So it's basically a lot of the information from the course that we've been doing. For all of you playing in Mastering Alchemy, numbers of people who have gotten the book and read through it that have been in the program, everybody's commented from this standpoint. It's like, oh, I didn't remember that part, or I missed that. Oh, now I understand. So from the standpoint of a review, the book is really valuable, we think, for Mastering Alchemy folks. For people who are interested in all of this work, it's a course. It's not a read through the book and now you've got a nice novel or science fiction type of, or mythical type of spiritual thing. It's a course. And the way it was set up, as we kind of wrote it, was that you have a lot of information available to you in that body work. If you didn't take Mastering Alchemy, you have a lot of information. But one of the things that we did to try to make it even more interesting is we made it into a link to a website for the book. And there are free lectures, there are follow-up meditations related to the particular chapter or piece of work that you're doing. So it's a multimedia book. And so far it's been pretty fascinating. People who have read it that kind of read books and make statements about it have been, a couple of people have labeled it the Course in Miracles for the 21st century. Wow. So it's like, wow, that's really pretty flattering. And I want to say real clearly, even though we wrote the book, Roxanne wrote the book. She's over there. So, she had to suffer through it. She had to go to Belize, sit on the beach for 3 months, figure it out. It was really a tragic event, hardship. And it was fun. So all the work we've been doing for years is basically the coursework is laid out. And she went there and sat with the Archangelics and others and basically tweaked it and took a lot of the transcripts we have from the classes, rearranged them, added quite a bit. She would send it to me sitting in the snow in Boise, and it was really cold and freezing, and I couldn't go out of the house, and the heater didn't work while she was on the beach. And then I would just kind of edit it and send it back, and we went back and forth, but it's really quite fascinating. We've done it with a publisher in London, Watkins Publishing, that has a big spiritual presence in Europe, so we're really kind of interested, excited to see what happens. So yesterday we follow this every once in a while. It's like, where are you on Amazon's 14,000 books? And I think yesterday we were
52, I think.
52.
Oh,
Yeah, so that's kind of, yeah. So it's kind of cool, fun. So, there you go. Anybody else? What else would you like to know about?
So you said a couple of times that relationships are the hardest thing.
Right.
And I'm wondering specifically about the dynamics of romantic relationships. And it seems to be the pattern, whether it's a one-night stand or 50-year marriage, where eventually there is a fizzle out of some sorts, in most cases, a fizzle out. And I'm wondering, is that an energetic, is it an energy that has just run its course? Is that a 3D thing? Is that something that maybe change in the 5D? Do we have hope? Or are we just going to keep going with this, I love you, love you, love you, and then all of a sudden I don't love you anymore, I'm bored with you?
Mm-hmm. Well, most everybody else will have hope. See, so let's back up to that. So the statement is relationships are the toughest game on the planet. You come here to be in relationship. So it's relationship with your environment, it's relationship in a job, it's relationship in a spousal love relationship, all of those things. And it's not that love fizzles out, it's I get a lot of times I love you is what we do, and we project it over there. But really the statement is misstated in a lot of ways. What happens is I like you, love you, because you're like me. See, we like likes. We don't like dislikes. So, but what happens is, it doesn't mean, or let me put it in this context. So what really happens in relationship, love relationships in particular, is I like you because you like tennis and golf, and I like tennis and golf, and I like you because you don't like Brussels sprouts, and I don't like Brussels sprouts. And so it doesn't mean I like you only for the things you like. I'm like you in many of the things that you're like. Does that make sense? So quite often what happens is we start out with, because I like you, that means I must, or I love you, I have this nice feeling. But the nice feeling really is I'm attracted to you because you're like me. So in a way, the I love you statement is spoken kind of inaccurately, because what you're really saying is, when I'm with you, I love me when I'm with you. See, you don't hand love away, you don't give it to someplace. It basically is in a space when I'm with you and we're not eating Brussels sprouts, I'm real happy. When we're playing golf, tennis, I'm real happy. When I see you smile, your smile makes me happy. And so does that make any sense? It's really, here's where I feel love. And so it's not over there. In your presence, I really am excited about me. So one of the things that we watch a lot of times that happens, and it's really an odd thing, is, so you like tennis, I like tennis, golf, etc. I'm attracted to you, we have all this relationship, and then you stop liking tennis. And then I stop playing golf. And all of a sudden the places where we had like and energy, they're no longer playing in that space. So in a lot of ways, all love relationships don't break up, or they really don't fizzle out exactly, they just stop being a match. And if people will understand that, there's a lot of ways where the really tragic part is, I love you for, I'll take you as my wife forever and ever. It's like, that. What I mean by that is, if you believe the oath and the structure and the game, and all of a sudden I'm not happy in your presence anymore, and I've got another 45 years with you, look around. You see it all the time. Relationships are unhappy. They're really just mismatched at that point. So this forever and ever thing to a third dimensional person is kind of how it's supposed to be. But as you start to step into a fifth dimensional relationship, one where we're talking about playing, and you can rearrange an awful lot. I like you because you like me in that space. But when you start to structure it from the standpoint, I like you because you're like me, and then I start to fall out of it, one of the worst things we do is we make the other person not okay. Hello, I'm getting bigger.
Tina told me to.
Thank you, Tina. So what happens in that space is we start to beat up the other person. You know, there's a lot of things that you do that aren't a match for me. And I really want you to be in my image of the perfect wife, husband. And so when you're not, it makes me angry, third dimension. And then I start to try to control you or condition you or fit you into a box, and you begin to get uncomfortable with that. And so we've got this push and shove. And then I yell at you and I embarrass you and I tell my friends how terrible you are, and it kind of escalates in that space. So what happened to the I love me when I'm with you? It kind of structurally falls apart. I think you're going to see in the fifth dimension space, there is definitely a relationship or a room for monogamy. There's people who love to simply love one person. I'm so like you. I love being with you. 80 years. It happens not because I have to or I made some oath, because I'm choosing to. But I think in the fifth dimensional space you're going to see a lot less monogamy. In fact, you're going to see lots of people living with one another, loving one another, but I have other things to do. Now, that doesn't mean other men, other women, it might mean that, but it basically says, I'm really all about living my life and sharing it with you, but I'm really all about living my life. And it's not in your box I'm living. And so you're seeing it with a lot of these kids. You're seeing some things happen that are really pretty astonishing around the world. You're watching populations start to get to a very aged level. You're watching countries not letting immigration in. Take Japan, for example. No immigration. Only Japanese live there. I mean, sometimes there's workers that come in. But basically, you're watching an aging population. You now have 1.2 kids for every 2 adults that are dying. Do the math. It doesn't take you very long to get out there to where there's not a lot of replacement going on. Then you have, in the Japanese society and in younger millennials also, a place where they're not having kids. They're just simply not having kids. In the United States, I just read a statistic, 26% of Latino women in the age group of 20 to 30 are not having kids. That's huge. 14% of blacks, I think 10% of women, white women, not having kids. People not getting married or getting into that relationship until they're in their 30s. So that's a huge backfill issue for an economy. In Japan, there's a phenomenon where sex isn't something that's interesting to kids. And you start to add that into the mix, and it's like, well, where do the new ones come from? So you're watching the world go through some very significant shifts in terms of moving an economy, moving civilizations. It's not happening like it happened in the last 50 years. But the love piece is something where it really is a decision. Why are you getting in that relationship? You know, what is it that you want? What are you about? And I'm so excited about what I'm about. Magnetically, you're going to start attracting people like you. And then it's a space where I'm having a lot of fun with you. And so, does that make sense? So the definition of how we're supposed to love and what we're supposed to do and should do really needs to be rethought. And particularly if you're not having a lot of success in the concept of what I think it's all about, and that's what this weekend's about. Maybe it's time to step back and say, all right, let me rethink this. What is it that I'm very much interested in happening? What is a relationship? So, anybody else?
Well, keeping on with the relationships, like you would think that there would be a perfect match for each person, where they would say they have a sacred relationship, a soulmate, a twin flame, something where they really come together and have an expression of love and spread that and recreate that.
Boring, very boring.
Yeah.
I'm being funny, but I'm not being funny. The reality is that there are hundreds of people that are perfect matches for you. Hundreds, if not more. So you think about, how did you get that relationship? It just was, I was at work and she was there. Okay, so there's some chemistry, there's matching going on in terms of the universe. We're always dumbfounded, like for example, in matching up you and the 8th ray groups. Unbelievable. It's like your best friend shows up. Now some of you don't play in it because you're still hiders, and that's happened all through the process. But we've got 8th ray groups that go back to 3, 4, 5, 6, and they still meet. I mean, it's amazing, the perfect match. So this concept that there's only one person, there's a concept, there's a soulmate, complete misnomer. We'll talk about that if you'd like, but you really hope you don't ever run into your soulmate. And I'll explain that in a few minutes with that as a question. But, and twin flames, whatever those are. See, for the most part, these are all concepts that we all get caught up in the spiritual nature and we throw it out. What do you want? How would you like to live your life? What kind of experiences would you like to have? And this is where that law of attraction is perfect. I say it all the time. It's absolutely flawless. And it's so simple, nobody gets it. Oh, everybody's read The Secret. Everybody believes, I know what the law of attraction is. I've heard Esther talk about it since 1990, talking about the law of attraction. But the reality, law of attraction, what you put your attention on is what the universe will provide for you. And the universe doesn't speak in English, French, and Spanish. The universe speaks in vibrations. So when you've got a real hidden backpack full of I'm not okay, I don't deserve him, those kind of things, the universe simply says, I'm not going to second guess your game. I'm not going to interfere with your creation. You're the creator. And I will give you exactly what you put your attention on. And so people have all this stuff that screams really loud that you put back there, that you're hiding, you don't want to be seen. And the universe says, no problem. Gee, Jim, you're waking up this morning and go, it's going to be a great day. Yeah, it's really going to be a great day. Oh, crap, I missed my bus, and those people are really rude, and pretty soon, what happened to your great day? Where's your attention point? Law of attraction. So there are many matches for you out there. And in that process of finding the match, it's really the ones that seem to work is the ones that understand we're going to have good days and bad days. And I like me when I'm with you. And when I watch that unfold, the room for disagreements, the room for, what did you do that for? Oh, the room for I'm having a bad day, basically begins to be a very elevated relationship in relationships. But it's a piece of work, and it's the biggest piece of work on the planet. So.
Jim, speaking of things that are undergoing major shift, because of the population, the baby boomers and so on, that huge wedge, we're experiencing a lot more people who are leaving. And I'm curious about what we're doing, what's going on, what needs to change with the death experience. What we do when people do choose to leave the body, how this is going to impact, how we get that message across, and so on. Could you speak to that?
Yeah, it's in a little bigger context that I would speak to it. But basically, one of the things that's happened in the last number of years, you've had a lot of technological fixes. And so the ability to improve aging has had really significant impact. I think you went from, I don't remember the year, but basically 58 in men and 60 in women was not so long ago, and now you're looking at 79 and 81 men and women. That's huge. But one of the things it did, it just moved everything forward. So you didn't have a traditional curve in the numbers of deaths. Now you're basically at a point where the body really isn't designed to live 100 years, 200 years old. I mean, there's places that do it, and they do it. If you look at all the places where there's 110, 120-year-old people, they have a very staid, very predictable, very clear life. None of the vibrations you're all in exist in their life. They don't do drama. They don't have all that going on. But in the context of death, if you step back to kind of a 30,000 foot level, and you look at what's going on in the world, you're watching some really remarkable changes in lots of places that people are just kind of saying, oh, isn't that interesting? But start connecting the dots. And some of those dots in terms of, just look at geopolitics in terms of the mass migrations. There's a whole shift into this fifth dimension, but a lot of people aren't going on this part of the journey. And so you're seeing major deaths in lots of ways, that in terms of nationality, Syria, Libya, all those kind of things going on. You're watching global challenges, global climate challenges that are going to get significantly more increased. You're going to watch, in that global aspect, you're going to watch droughts and flooding. You're going to start to see earthquakes begin to happen at a very different level. They've been very much concentrated where there is not a lot of people. That's going to change. I think you're going to start to see an aged population particularly beginning to have changes. You're watching things begin to come back into the mix. Syphilis and gonorrhea, for example. Syphilis was gone. It's not gone anymore. It's very much an epidemic in certain circles. Gonorrhea, for example, which is just, oh, it's a sexually transmitted disease. No, it's not. It's much more, and now I'm talking with my ownership of a biomedical company hat on. We have a test that we produce for gonorrhea, and one of the things is there are 12 antibiotics like penicillin, vancomycin, those kind of things. Gonorrhea now is absolutely immune to all 12 of them. And around the world, gonorrhea is expanding. You don't hear about it because it's not happening in your neighborhood, but there's a lot of things you don't hear about in your neighborhood. And so if I was to kind of stay at 30,000 feet, you're going to start to see the opportunity for pandemics is increasing significantly. And a lot of those things, there's a whole level of the Black Plague that was, way back in the 1800s. It's showing up again. So it won't take many to get out of control. And then take this with a grain of salt. You're watching many things in the United States that are both predictors, leadership levels, rapid response mechanisms. The CDC was just cut by 18%. CDC is a world institution run by the United States. The whole world depends on CDC, and basically, well, no, we don't need to do that anymore. Now, I'm not being political. I'm just saying you're watching the unraveling of some very major accomplishments that once you stop paying attention to the both maintenance and support, the decline in the capacity drops off really quickly. And so a lot of that is going to lend itself to, just look at Puerto Rico getting hit by that storm. They still do not have electricity. And when we've given them enough water, the government says. It's like, you've got to be kidding me. So you're seeing a lot of real disruptive levels, but underneath you're seeing a lot of people getting very uncomfortable. I don't mean politically reactionary. They're starting to say something's not right. And that's going to take, you saw in the last weeks with the kids in Florida, and hopefully that catches on, because you're going to see, they're finally saying, wait, we're inheriting this, what the hell are you doing? And hopefully they'll get real loud about it. So.
You're connected with the Archangelics, and Lee Carroll is with Cryon and Guanan. I have always had a connection with the Great White Brotherhood.
Yes.
And do they pick you, or is that a soul contract?
So you come from these places. You all come from these places. You said, I'm going to come here at this particular time when this huge transition happens. And it's like a major event in spiritual universe. I mean, it's like the prime TV show. This is the game. And you said, send me and come here. There's a lot many in all kinds of capacities, engineers, physicists, biologists, political correct people kind of thing, numbers of us that are spiritually oriented. We come from those groups. Take Esther. She makes it really clear. I am Abraham. It's not like I come from Abraham. I am Abraham. So, and she explains it very clearly that there's this kind of grouping of energetics that has this capacity, stature, understanding, and she is the spokesperson in the physical body. So all she did was kind of bring herself into a physical form, minimize some level of her capacity because of the narrowness of humanism. Took her a number of years to bump around, figure it out, and then all of a sudden it kicked in when it was time to kick in. And she makes it really clear. Steve Rother makes it really clear. Steve speaks for the group, comes from that nature of the group. He's now basically picking up a number of others that are adding to the messaging. You know, you listen to Jeff Hoppe, he doesn't say, I come from one of them. He doesn't take that approach, but he is connected with Adamus St. Germain, and he and Adamus basically create a message. So in my reality, when you look at how Lee Carroll does it, or Jeff, or even Steve, they basically allow that voice to come in and take a prominence. In my structuring, it is I am them and they are me, but the presentation to you is they're speaking, I'm speaking right now. This alignment is right here. And this is how it can be done very easily. There's no, here, let me step aside and let Joe come in and talk, and that's what he'll have to say. It's really this space of, we're going to play this tomorrow, this tetrahedron that you created in level 1. And is simply we set it up in that place so it had a lot of good feeling to it, okay? Connecting with the archangelics, with the elementals, in that kind of space, with the animal kingdom, a lot of ooh and ahs in there, and a lot of alignment. But it was the tetrahedron that is the game changer. So that tetrahedron, you hear me talk about getting into the internal guidance system, getting into the sacred heart, and in there, there's a table. My word, there's a place of communication, you know, and the table belongs to you. It doesn't belong to anybody else. And at that table, you sit with all, whomever. But it's your table. You aren't invited to their table. You're the creator. You're the one with the physical body. The archangelics, all of them, all say, we can tell you all the probabilities. We can tell you all the possibilities. We can tell you how the events are maybe most likely going to unfold, but you have the physical body. You, in physicalness, or let's say just physicalness, created this circumstance, and it can only be created in a different formatting in a physical form. So in my case, the job is to basically uplift and poke you, point in a lot of ways, for you to make some decisions on your own about how to basically embody that living light body. It's in that living light body, which we're as clear as we can be. You will sit on a bench, you will command a presence, that light will be so intense and you'll be absolutely conscious of what you're doing. You're not fixing anybody, you're not changing anybody, you're not transforming anybody, you're not telling them what to do. You just are simply, and you'll hear me say this in later sessions, you know, here's humanity floundering in this ice-cold, freezing water, really upset, and you say, well, I'm going to make a beach. And you invent the beach, and the warmth, and the palm trees, and the pina coladas, and basically, one by one, they will come. You know, they'll find their way to the beach, one by one, 10 by 10, hundreds by hundreds, and they'll flop on the beach, and they'll get warm, and they'll start to feel better. and they'll forget where they were, and they will remember where they are. And they'll start to thrive and remember and enjoy and be happy. And somebody will say, well, who built this beach? And everybody will look at each other and go, I don't know. And you'll be on to your next beach. That's what you'll do. That's what's unfolding. You don't know that yet because the pieces aren't in place. And just like go back and we used to talk with Esther, and she would say, well, this is how this all unfolded. There was nothing going on. You know, she was just a woman aging and having a life, and all of a sudden, one day these events started happening, and she never goes back. Can't go back. So here.
I have a question about Ephraim and El Shaddai. We'll be working first, second, third chakras to clean and align and make it healthier. How about 4, 5, 6, 7? They are also in our bodies, right? So
Yes.
Are they perfectly fine, or
No, they're perfectly functioning. They relate more to your spiritual space. The question is chakras 4, 5, 6, and 7. But when you create the triads, when you become conscious of the triads, you basically create a reconfiguration of those upper chakras. And so they start to function differently, they begin to be expanded, they have a very expanded purpose. When they begin to function inside the first triad, the 4th and 5th chakra inside the first triad, they begin to resonate to a whole different format. Very expanded. The 6th chakra, 7th chakra, pineal center in the 2nd triad, they begin to open up, they begin to turn on. They begin to have a different sense of purpose. Tomorrow when we play with the Eye of Horus, so the Eye of Horus, again, it's not a necklace that you wear around your neck or some mystery school in Egypt. It's a configuration within the brain, and when it begins to turn on and activate, it starts to create a very expanded vibrational field. It's as simple as the brain's turning back on. You know, that 5% Einstein brain and the other 95, well, something's going on, but we don't know. Kind of science response to the brain. Right where you're in the process of the playing, even right now, in those triads, you have more brain activity that's accessible and usable than I'm going to project than Einstein had. Now, he had something, and it worked really good, but he didn't just show up. He didn't just get born here. He was one that came from someplace else. And so the whole alignment in his brain structure was all set for the message that he delivered. Really, it's that simple. You know, you watch a lot of these people. Tesla was another one. So way back when you had Tesla and Edison kind of battling out whether it's AC electricity or DC electricity, the money won. That's all there is to it. And unfortunately, in a way, the money won. And so we took this path rather than this path. I'll tell you very clearly, if we'd taken this path, a lot of things would not have happened. A lot of things would not have happened. Wars would not have happened. But same thing here. You go back, and if everybody listened when they were supposed to listen, you talk with Saint Germain, and one of his stories, it's really humorous and interesting and sad all at the same time, is he was counseling Napoleon. Now, Saint Germain lived about 300 years, so that's another story for another day. And at one point, he made himself available to all the great czars and presidents, and that was his game, playing there. And he makes a funny comment often. People would say, "Oh, I knew your father." No, George, we had that dinner, don't you remember, 35 years ago? And so they never quite understood that. He always laughs about that. But there was one point where he did something as close as he possibly could and said to Napoleon, "I'm going to show you, you do not want to do this war. You do not want to go to war with England at Waterloo." And Napoleon was very narcissistic and arrogant, and he said, I'm going to show you something. And he said, I stood behind a cloth and I illuminated my light body. Napoleon closed his eyes. It was so bright. And he said, I'm showing you something that I'm speaking from this space. And stepped back from behind the curtain, and Napoleon said, wow, okay, I hear you, but I've got to leave now, I've got to go off to war. If Napoleon had not gone to Waterloo, what you know as capitalism, what you know as money, what you know as all those things, would be very different. So you have all these turning points, and at all the turning points, there are great beings in physical presence. So, bigger answer as usual than the question is asked, but in my case, it's a space where I know something, I can show you how things work, I can explain things from lots of different ways, I can speak from a we place. If it requires more of Yeshua's presence, kind of stepping to the front of the stage and speaking, very easily done. But what we want you to see is you in a human form are no different than I am. I'm no different than you are. You know, there's no better. Do I have a body of information? Yes. Does Metatron have a huge body of information? Yes. But when you're sitting at the table with a Metatron or a Yeshua or a Mary or an Anna, whomever it may be, you're having a conversation like this. So yeah, they know a lot. But right here, it's like, well, how do we work this out? What can we do? And it's a eyeball-to-eyeball type of conversation. Does that make sense? Does that help your question somewhat?
Yes.
More than yes. Kind of comes with the territory.
Hi, Jim. You hear a lot more in the news about these documents, these secret documents that are coming out about UFOs, and a lot of more UFO sightings. I always thought that these higher beings were in charge of this, and why would they need what do you call it, a vehicle? You know,
They don't want to walk.
Can you talk a little bit more about UFOs?
All right, so you can't. So there's your proverbial they. The they are bigger. Well, the they is 500 gazillion trillions. There's a lot of theys out there, and all the theys have different configurations. A lot of the ones that are referred to as extraterrestrials. Let me put it this way: the galaxy is really somewhat locked down. You're in a fallen state, and everything in the galaxy is in a fallen state, and everything in this solar system is in a fallen state. And this planet had a very key role in the chemistry project of the fallen state, in a manner of speaking. Because, see, what makes this planet unique is there were, in the experiment of the creation of physicalness, there were 12 Christed planets. 12. And within the 12, they're not all in the fallen state construct, but most of them are. And only one fell. This one fell. And so it's very much in the fallen state. And so what makes it really exciting, and what you're all about, is can you raise your own vibration into that living light body, fully, well, let's not say fully, Christed state of consciousness, to begin to know yourself. And in that space, can you hold the door open for everybody else, humanity, to move into that fifth dimensional Christed state? And what's interesting is a lot of them, you'll hold the door open, and they'll just find the beach. They'll get happy on the beach, and they'll say, what's that door over there? And they'll just find themselves in a fifth dimensional space. I'm being really simple. It'll take a lot more for many of them, but some of them will make that transition. But what you also said is, in what I know, and we'll play here tomorrow in a couple of specific ways, is I'm interested in elevating the Earth back to that fully 12th dimensional state of consciousness where it is a fully Christed physical being. And so, I'm not talking about Gaia, I'm talking about the Earth. Gaia is the consciousness of this, the caretaker in a way, the person playing the game with it, having a knowledge. So that's what you're committed to. But the beings that are in this galaxy space, in this general solar system, constellation space that you pay attention to, are mixed. There are beings that are very, very highly elevated, but also caught in the game. Assyrians, the Arcturians are way out on the outside edges of it. Brilliant beings, just brilliant beings. And yet they're somewhat, I'm going to just say, tainted by it. But does it control them? No. The Pleiadians are interesting. They kind of go both ways. So part of their game was to keep it moving forward, but not let it get too out of balance over here or too out of balance over here. So they kind of go both ways. They'll play on the dark side, they'll play on the light side, and that's how it works. A lot of those spaceships that you see really are not so far away, and they're in states of fallen state, a little more so, a little less so in a way, but everybody's playing the game to get out to a great extent. So, but as far as that whole aspect, I don't pay virtually any attention to it. You know, it's somebody else's game, something's going on, they've got a project over here, it's not my project. So.
You've spoken about how the sun is changing, and I was wondering if you could elaborate on that. How can we utilize the sun as it is and where we're going with it for physical healing?
Well, from a physical healing standpoint, you've got outside the fallen state, the cosmic center, I don't know what that means, outside the fallen state, or even from the center of the galaxy, you have massive waves of light that are now coming in to the solar system, into this parsec of the galaxy, that are all about transformation. So everything is changing, not just the Earth, everything is changing. And, but it's always changing, because that's the nature of Source. It wants to know itself, so it's constantly in an evolutionary or a set of changes. But as these waves come in now, they come into the sun and they get stepped down, second ray. Sun steps down the cosmic waves, and then you wind up getting a lot of light from the sun into the Earth. But one of the things that is structured, doesn't make any sense to the average person, is what we call the Earth's magnetic field. You know, when you see these pictures of the solar bursts and it hits the magnetic field, you get this big blue looping protection that sits there, this round field. That round field is third dimension. It's the structuring of third dimension. The magnetic nature of the game that we play is in that magnetic alignment is what holds third dimension in place. But as we've said, third dimension went away. The door was closed on third dimension. It doesn't play out anymore in the game. But your belief system is it still exists, so it still exists, but it doesn't really physically exist. So if, in that statement, so if the carpet was third dimension, and you're so used to walking on the carpet, and then the carpet is removed, you still believe the carpet's there. So what it did when it was there, in terms of the magnetics and the rigidness and a lot of the constructs that it held in place magnetically, that's all been removed. You just believe it's still there, or a average person believes. But this is where a lot of the challenges for an average person is their status quo is changing. Everybody, ask anybody, and basically say, something's not right, is how the response usually is. It's like, oh, something's weird, something's not right. Pretty much everybody will tell you, well, what is it that's not right? Well, I don't know. And see, the rub's gone. But I believe it's there, so because I believe it's there, it still basically has some sense of being intact. But what's happening in the magnetic field on the Earth in relationship to the sun is the poles are changing. So the poles, you think they sit like this, that's what they were supposed to do, they aren't there anymore. So the South Pole you don't hear a lot about, you do hear more about the North Pole, but the North Pole has moved like, I should know the number, but I think I want to say 167 miles. It's just moved, but of late it's moved more rapidly. It's over in Siberia, and it's moving south. It's moving to a very specific point, we believe. And I shouldn't say it that way. The savvy scientists believe it. You think that the South Pole is in the Antarctic. It's not even in the Antarctic anymore. It's moved north and west. Well, you make that up. As you would look at a map, north and west. It's outside. It's between Australia and Antarctica. It too is moving. But what happens when this bar magnet begins to no longer be in alignment? The conditionality of the magnet, the intensity of the magnet, starts to fall apart. It's not as strong of a magnet. So you're watching the Earth's magnetic field collapse. You're watching third dimension collapse. Now, in regard to the sun, those light frequencies, those cosmic waves, those photon belt type of concepts, this is huge intelligence of source. And all of the step up 10, 12 notches, all the great beings that understand how to move around magnetisms and the physics of these higher dimensions. And so we're in a transition. That cosmic wave light that's being stepped down and moved from the sun, you're being significantly changed. Every human's being changed. And a lot of it, this is where I said yesterday, it's like your backdrop, your environment, your walking around space. It's really changing, but it's changing at a speed where you're able to say, something's changing, I don't know what it is, I can't put my finger on it. Where in the past it would change much slower. So it's as if, as you're looking at me, this back wall is starting to somehow change hues of color. All of a sudden it's not flat anymore, it might have some different kinds of rippling in it, but you're not paying attention. So a little light goes off and another little light goes off, and you look back at it and go, well, something's different, and then you go back to the conversation. That's what's happening in your life with these cosmic waves. But with the sun specifically, it's an interesting thing, and listening to some really bright scientists that are paying attention, there are a lot of them. The sun usually, or has for a number of years, had these 11-year sun cycles. And what that sun cycle is, basically the sunspots are, they have a magnetic field, a north pole and a south pole, in manner of speaking, or a positive, negative charge. And they're constantly, there's energy coming out of these. A lot of times, you'll get a connection, an arcing of this energy, and out of that you get these huge solar flares quite often. You'll also see in the sun these, if you see they measure them in angstroms, you look at different color, blue and yellow and green pictures of the sun, you'll see these big dark spots occasionally. And those dark spots are coronal holes, and massive winds come out of that. So that's where the solar winds come from. In the high season, all of these little sunspots are closer to the equator, if you would. And so you get a lot of electromagnetic frequency going, a lot of earth energy, a lot of winds, and a lot of this field hitting the earth, changing the earth. In the other 11-year cycle, all those spots move to the poles. And so you get almost no activity going on because everything's up at the poles and it's gotten much calmer. So that's what you see in these 11-year cycles. This 11-year cycle, and in the last 11-year cycle, you're seeing lower highs of the big intensities of the winds. You're getting lower highs and lower lows, meaning the curve is starting to decline, how much energy is being sent out of the sun. What makes it interesting is you start mapping that and you say, well, when was the last time this happened? Well, they've been able to figure out what the last 11,000 years of cycles of the sun look like. And there is a very pronounced cycle that seems to happen between 300 and 600 years, but pretty much right about 450 years. The last time this particular solar cycle happened was in 1650 to 1720. That period of time was called the mini ice age. You could walk across the Thames or the Rhine River. It was frozen. India had 2.5 years without a drop of water. Millions of people died. That's the cycle we're stepping into. So the question about mass extinction and death. So is there a whole transition going on from 30,000 feet in terms of climate changes and migrations and populations? Is there a whole aspect of third dimension that doesn't want to change? And when you look at those beings as beings, they basically say, hey, I'm out of here. I can't handle these step-ups. I'm not ready to handle them. I'd rather just check out. And so, not as a prediction, but I think you're going to watch some very significant mass extinction in the next numbers of years. Did I get close to your question?
Yeah, I'm just wondering if there's a way we can use the sun for physical healing.
You are just align with it.
Right.
Start in line with it. One of the things we're going to basically do, this Christed matrix in the heart, is exactly the same Christed matrix in the heart of the earth. And so, remember we've been playing that, can you be aware of your attention point moving, and then can you expand your sense of yourself to include your left foot without having to move to figure out if it's there, and how big can you expand? It really doesn't take much to be one with the earth because this is already there. So when you start playing in that space and then engaging with Gaia, we'll do that tomorrow, where you start to engage with the elementals that have now been really elevated through a lot of work with humans, many of them, a great portion of it through the groups in Mastering Alchemy. You start to have a co-creation in a fifth dimensional space that is about healing you as well as healing the planet simultaneously. Yeah.
Jim, I've been with the Mastering Alchemy work and just in general spiritual work, have been releasing a lot of fears, and the big one is death. And from what I understand, I have a little bit of confusion between the shift and the Merkaba. And I wanted to know, obviously you're still here, but your perspective of that death experience into that time, or the angelic realms, what their perspective is on that.
So I'm going to tell you something that is very hard to grasp, and that is, so if I told you you didn't have to die, let me say it even a better way. Death is not what you think it is. And when you basically begin to look at what death is, I'll give you an example in a second, the ability to go through in the physical body death and not die is very available to you.
This body that we have
Yep.
right now.
Yep, that one right now. Very available to you. So when you start to define death, what is the first set of thoughts and words you come into? I want to avoid it, or it's not exciting, and people who die usually are in pain or some kind of suffering, and you put it all together. But have you ever had the really astonishing opportunity to sit with somebody dying right now? I mean, they boom, gone. It's like, what? You can't be gone. What? How did that happen? Right now, boom, they're gone. Have you ever had that experience? In that experience, one of the things that happens, especially if somebody has some sense of spiritual orientation, If they're just terrified by death, it's like they're looking down and all they can see is, this is the terrible thing. I'm in fear. The body doesn't like the idea of dying, because that's the one thing that goes away. But when you start to sit with people who have died, and I've had that situation 6 times, like, where'd you go? Gone. Just gone. It's an amazing thing. But in numbers of those cases, what the person starts to say is, it's so beautiful. It is so incredible. Wow, and look, the angels. People say, well, they've lost it now. They're leaving, and they've lost it. But in fact, the ability to play where you're playing, and particularly in that light body, the ability to arrange your energy in such a way and basically look at what death is and step into it. It's an experience, it's not an end. But 3D defines it as death and taxes, the end of it, you can't avoid this. Well, this whole structure, nobody has really seen somebody really die and stay quite alive and talk about it. But one of the things that we're starting to bring into the awareness is death is an experience. It's not painful, it's not scary, it's actually quite remarkable. And it's doable without going into all of the panics and the misalignments and having the body freak out. Now, are we going to teach that? Probably not. In the Living Light Body group, what we're doing is posing it. Just simply posing, what if this could happen? Because as soon as you start to point in a group that's in that state of light body, they all of a sudden start to gravitate to it. Not that they're going to do it, they're going to basically entertain it. And it's in the entertaining of a possibility that the imprint starts to occur in the ethers. And so it's a seed being planted, but it's a seed that actually is very available to you if it was something you chose. Very few will choose this, but do you have
That's okay, go ahead first.
Of course, I am old and I've made my will, and I learned from metaphysics studies that you're supposed to, the outer bodies take 3 days to leave. So when I went to get my funeral, I told them they had to hold my body for 3 days. Now my friends are making their will. Is it true that you have to hold the body for 3 days before they leave, the outer bodies leave?
Who told you that?
I have a whole bunch of books in my basement.
Oh, yeah. They told you that. Oh, yeah, that's what they said. Yeah. I'll tell you what, at the 3rd day, I'll ask you the question. And then we'll figure it out together.
I'll come down tonight.
You're not leaving tonight, are you?
No.
Yeah, 3 days later, we'll come and turn your rock over and see.
She's left 3 times before.
Well, then here she is, it must work.
Right.
So people in Facebook have a question.
This question is from Cynthia. Where and how does karma fit in with 3D people now, since in 2012, no more were born into 3D?
So karma is an interesting game, and it's basically a created game of balance. And see, a lot of these games are directed, like karma, at 3D to find balance. And, you know, like the 10 Commandments were set in place for a purpose. That purpose was then, so that doesn't make any sense today, those same 10 states of being. Karma was put in place to try to keep balance. And so if you start playing in awareness of karma, well, I don't want to create a disbalance. Also in the 3D game, karma was created so that as you died and you went into that reincarnation loop, you basically had a new set of experiences to play in on the opposite side of I punched you in the nose, now you punched me in the nose. And so it was really about a balancing aspect. For all of you, karma is not even it's gone. It's not even your reality. Now, at the 12-12-12, the third dimension went away, but the belief the third dimension still exists. And so there's all kinds of people who believe karma is really something to play in. And if you believe it is, you're correct, or if you believe it isn't. And if you continue to hold your vibration on, law of attraction is happy to give you more karmic experiences. So, but what we've watched is part of the kind of the agreement with you is stepping into mastering alchemy. Karma's not a game anymore. It's not something you're playing. It's basically a state of figuring out how to, instead of have to have amends and I did bad things, so I need to be flatulate myself and all, it's not necessary. Can you blow the picture? Can you recognize in that time sequence in the past, I did this or I had this experience, but do I have to carry it with me as a guilt or an obligation? And you're all becoming very clear that you can rearrange your past and your future in a manner that serves you in present time. So for you, karma is not a game, but for a lot of people, it's still in the construct of the belief system.
Jim, this next one, yeah, is from another person online. This is Jan, who's in level 1. I find great power in bringing in the triad of Metatron, Michael, and Melchizedek. Can you speak about the energetics of this triad? They seem to bring in huge energy.
Well, they do bring in huge energy because they're huge beings. And that particular alignment, you know, Michael holds is kind of the aligner of light in physical form. And he makes sure it stays stable. That's his primary role. Metatron, both as a teacher and very much engaged in the construct and the deconstructing of third dimension as one of the archangelics and one of the lords of light. They wear different hats. Is very much engaged in this whole game. Melchizedek, outside of the fall of consciousness and kind of an overseer as one of the lords of light, the physics, the mechanics, all of the science side, if you would, of spiritualism, is really committed to basically creating the Great White Brotherhood, for example, as part of Melchizedek's format for moving the earth and third dimension into a resurrected state. So, yeah, very potent grouping of people, but no more potent than Raphael or Yeshua or Uriel. None are better than anybody else. The real question you want to ask is, what do I want to accomplish, and who best can I ask to accomplish that? And one of the great things about channeling, as you basically begin to allow yourself to engage, and you're all becoming very available to this, in not just any being coming in, but these beings. The real question is, I need some assistance. Here's my question, who can help me? And they'll come in and basically say, I'm Uriel, or I'm Michael, or I'm whomever it is, and give you some guidance. So, but be clear what I said earlier. They come in right where you're sitting. They don't come in as some big, powerful, all-knowing... I lost my space. I really was getting excited. They said, hey, we can do this. It's like, yeah, I get it. It happens all the time. So we little ones, we sit here. There's an aspect, too, which you will come to understand, particularly as you play in the moving forward through the course of mastering alchemy. Metatron makes it really, really clear. We are you, and you are we. They'll say it. You'll hear them say it numbers of times. But basically, we're no better than, and for the most part, you come from us in some configuration, and you're in the body, and we're here to kind of be oversight pointing on your behalf, or give you whatever you want. When you can begin to grasp that and allow that, and sit there and engage with it, And this is where, for all of you here, where I'm saying that shifting from I need to go out there to get my truth, my books, or somebody to tell me how to do it. Well, I need that to be okay. This shift that usually happens kind of right in first year 3, level 3, is you start to realize I'm fine and I'm capable, and I can simply start to ask and it will arrive, and it comes to you. Well, in that space of coming to you, you start to realize that engagement with the archangelics, the lords of light, the ascended masters, really are all at that table. That tetrahedron in the heart is where you go into that sacred heart and really merge. And the whole aspect of merging with, becoming one with, becomes very clear to you as you start to have this sense of certainty and commanding of your presence in this space. It's all about you, 100% about you. And they will not interfere. They will not advise, they will not anything if you are either not in agreement or you don't ask. So it's really quite a fabulous place to play. Is that all, Roxanne? Yes? 2. Anybody else? Other questions? Sure. Is this helpful? Interesting?
Yeah.
Okay.
I have a question. I'm reading your book, The Third Dimension, Falling Way. And anyway, my question is, to me, it's a spiritual awakening.
Yes.
But I have a lot of questions because I'm not in your workshop or anything, but I guess my main question is, when you go into the fourth dimension, you know, are you going forward, or do you fall back? How does that work?
It kind of depends. In a way, good question. So the fourth dimension is a thought realm, not a physical realm. And the fourth dimension holds all the thoughts ever thought that have not been manifested in third dimension or in third dimensional form. So, for example, I might be really angry and I want to murder somebody, but I don't. But the thoughts, you ever ask yourself where do thoughts go when you're done thinking the thought you just thought? I know that's a very intellectual question that you've asked often, so let me help you out. Thoughts just don't go poof and go away. Some have greater density, like murdering somebody, really enraged, anger, a lot of density. Butterflies and puppy dogs, little babies, lesser happy density. So I'm making this up kind of, but let's say there's 8 layers to the fourth dimension. The murder, rape, incest, heavy stuff is really right down here at the bottom. And the lighter ones are a little bit higher up. So depending on how you hold your attention and how you hold your thinking, basically that fourth dimension is very much engaged with you. So one of the places you find fourth dimension is when you go to sleep at night. If you go to sleep in a way where you're upset, irritated with the boss or something like that, you know that a lot of times you don't sleep quite as well. Well, that alignment of irritation as you start to go out of the body, it's as if there's all these strings of thoughts ever thought, and all of the other people who thought irritation with the boss have this nice long string of irritation. And your magnetic field, as you go out, all of a sudden becomes very attractive to that magnetic field. That's where you find yourself in some of these really odd dreams. They're not your dreams. So how you go into sleep space is very much related to how you'll experience your night space. One of the things you've all done fairly well is just out of necessity is you figured out a well-worn pathway. And you go out and you come back pretty much most all the time without a lot of magnetism pulling you and pushing you. So that fourth layer of thought is always available to you. You live in it right now. You're very much in it right now because right now you're not thinking about dinner 2 hours ago or what you're going to have for breakfast. You're right here. And so right here, by definition, now. I'm present in my now space. In that now space right here, you have choice to believe this or like it or dislike it, all those kind of things. In third dimension, you don't have choice. There is no choice, there's reaction. But you play in third, fourth dimension, overlapping all the time, and fifth dimension now, if you start to hold well-being. So that's kind of how that fourth dimensional space plays out.
Jim, here's a question from someone online, Virginia. Could you please expand on rearranging the past and the future to assist our present time?
So here you are, right here you are, right now, here you are. So virtually everything that's happened in your past in this fourth dimensional time space that we're in right now is not playing on you. But maybe earlier today, family, let's say family called and there's a particular member of the family that's really irritating and they want you to do something. And every time that person calls, you just go into this state of irritation, kind of automatically into the state of irritation. And what you're really doing is you're recognizing it's them, and as soon as you go, oh, it's them, all of the energy of the past that you resist just comes flooding right into that particular space. And so one of the things that basically about rearranging your past and future is what if you realize that they're just somebody in your reality. Let's even change the game a little bit. They're in my family structure, but I don't need to, I'm going to treat them as somebody that I know rather than a sister or a brother. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I'm going to treat them as a relationship. I'm not going to treat them as family. Now, I'm not doing away with family here at all, but if you can make that kind of a decision, all of a sudden you have a very different set of constructs that you enter into that engagement with that person. Does that make any sense? And so, and I did this with my mother. Literally, I had a hard time with my mother for a lot of years, and finally I made a decision that she's simply an older lady trying to figure out life as best she can, and I'm not going to treat her as my mother. I'm not going to give this, this sense of treating her as mother. I'm going to treat her as my friend. I'm going to treat her as somebody that I have an association with. But I'm going to take the label mother-son out of the mix. Am I making any sense? And all of a sudden, I could see her as an older woman, kind of struggling with her life, trying to make things all work, and that was who she was. And I tell you, it was one of the more freeing things that ever happened to me. And my relationship with her changed. I wasn't being in the animosity, the resistance, and you've done this to me. All the you've done this to me went away. Instantly, just went away. It was like, that was really simple. And it made a dramatic difference. Can you hear the difference in rearranging your past? My relationship with her in the future instantly changed because I no longer held her hostage in my future because of all the things she did or didn't, or I think she might have in my past. And so when you can get to the place where you can basically see people and events as, do they relate to me right here, and how would I like to look at them right here, right now, then it's a game changer. But when you hold on to, she's never going to be, he's always going to be, there's no flexibility or fluidity, mobility in that kind of space. So hope that helps.
Jim, one more from someone online. This is from Diana. You mentioned Napoleon as a narcissist. Will narcissists and people like that choose not to ascend, or can they move into a fifth dimensional state?
So, none in particular that I would draw to your attention. But there are, so look at it this way. These people are in a lot of pain. A tremendous amount of pain. And that pain, to a great extent, is a reactionary nature to them covering up that pain. Now, that's one side of it. There are other people that come into the body and they just have this sense of they're important, there's an entitlement. However they come to that concept, they hold on to it. There are other people who are very smart, very successful, and they basically, from that smartness, decide they have entitlement. And then it's like, look at me, I'm really this good. And it's not unlike any other combination of energies that you choose to wear. Some people are shy, some people are victims, some people are narcissists, some people are aggressive, some people are hiders. It's an alignment of beliefs and thoughts that put you into a place that says, this is how I see the world, or this is how the world sees me. And you are the star actor, actress in your play. And as you basically set it up, you start creating your props and your backdrops and your alignment, your staging, and it all is there to support you. It's a place where, how do you want to play? And a lot of people just play those games out and come and go, and next lifetime they make a decision, well, maybe I'll do it differently. But you're about having an experience, and that's one of those experiences. So I can't tell you whether somebody is bad or good, is going to go into a fifth dimensional space. But I do know when you hold a lot of sense of yourself in pain and fear, and then you cover it up with, look at how good I am, that's a pretty pained state, and that's not a balanced state in a fifth dimensional reality. So, I hope that makes some sense. Let's take a couple more questions. I don't want to stay here until 9 o'clock because half of you are falling asleep because you've been going all day and all day yesterday, and the energy today was very significant that really requires some rest. So maybe we'll do 4 or 5 more questions.
My question is about the causal body that you mentioned that holds all the great experiences that we've ever had.
That the soul has ever had.
That the soul, that the soul has ever had. Yet those experiences are held within what is known as the causal body?
Yes.
And so my question is, as we are able to hold ourselves more stably in the fifth dimensional consciousness, is the causal body one of the bodies that will be aligning?
Yes.
In the fifth dimensional consciousness?
Yes, in the light body, in the alignments even. See, it's one of your bodies. Mm-hmm. And so as you start to play in moving towards that light body, there is a kind of requirement to bring all these bodies into an alignment. And that includes the Christed Oversoul. You have an alignment in that alignment of energy. And so as you bring all these into a kind of an alignment, the etheric body, the mental emotional one body, the causal body, the oversoul, Christed Oversoul, all of those basically begin to be this very raised vibrational field. And then there's a point where you create a merging with the physical body.
Because that sounds certainly as if it would redefine, it would give us a new life. If we are in the energetics of our greatness, of all things that we've experienced that are great, then that's quite a redefinition to how we know ourselves compared to right now.
Think about it this way. There's a piece of graph paper. And on the graph paper, there's these little 1/8-inch squares. And right now, you're one of those squares. Just one. And as you're playing, where you're starting to become more conscious, more awake, you're basically clearing away a lot of the noise out of that. So that mental, emotional body has 3 tiers to it, even though you're going to merge it together. And that lowest tier is 3rd dimension, 4th dimension thought, anger, rage, resentment, all this. There's a point where you're going to just wipe that whole piece out. So as you start to clean away that and you start to elevate your awareness, you start to add to a square, and you add to a square, and you add to a square, and then you watch more squares. And then pretty soon where you were 1 square, now you're 8 squares. And then you start to approach that alignment in the light body, let's say, and now you're 12 squares. But the graph paper is this big. And now being 12 squares, are you more wise, capable, opportunistic in terms of knowing yourself? And does it look anything like the 1 square did? Not really. Does that make it that simple? And so as you begin to do this, the wisdom and the knowledge, the awareness you have basically begins to be greater and greater. And I'll tell you, somewhere in the middle of the the year 1 of level 3, I'm going to ask you how you're doing. And you're going to say, well, okay. Or what does that mean? Well, I've lost all my friends. What I thought was important is not important. I'm not really excited by my job. Food's not really interesting to me. What I thought was important is not important. And I'll say, huh, interesting. Well, how are you doing? Oh, pretty good, actually. It'll be your answer. Well, you're not spread out all open. No, kind of quiet. With anything going on? No, nothing's going on. You're okay? Yeah, I'm okay. I like it. In fact, it's really good. I guarantee it. You will say that. Plus or minus, but pretty much right in that range. What does that mean? It means a lot of the things that they told me, a lot of the things that I thought, all the shoulds I should do, all of a sudden I'm realizing, wait a minute, there's kind of more to this than what I should be. You know, it's not important to be the vice president of and the. So you're going to basically hit that space. And then it's like, well, what is interesting? Being sitting in this space is interesting. And then it starts to take on some additional configurations. Yeah.
Jim, this afternoon you mentioned that you would talk about the 2 Earths.
Yes, I did.
Is that too expensive to go into now?
No.
Okay.
No. So this 5th dimensional consciousness is so let me put it this way. Third dimension, moving into 5th dimension, you can't take your baggage with you. All right, so everybody kind of goes, all right, I get that part. But everybody doesn't get that part. There's a lot of folks out there that are really uncomfortable, even upset about the status quo shifting around. Good example, non-political, look at the world in the United States, and there are a whole lot of people that are upset about variations of the status quo being disrupted for all kinds of reasons. And so that space is something where there's a lot of people. Now let me back out of that example, just really stay out of the politics of it. But there are a lot of people that cannot have the 5th dimension. They're really engaged in owning their anger and owning their purpose and owning all kinds of things, but not getting rid of their baggage. And that's a lot of spiritual people on top of it. You know, the number of spiritual people that I talk to that basically say, I got it together. And you say, sure it does. What about that pimple on your nose? Well, what are you asking me about that for? Wow. Boom. So your stuff is coming out, but owning, clearing your stuff is very different. And so there's a lot of folks that are going to stay in the arguments, stay in the defensiveness, stay in the defining who they are. There are a lot of folks in the spiritual community that say, this is what God is, this is how it is. Okay, no argument. Is it possible that it might be this also? No. Okay, no argument. Look at the religions. Very structured, very rigid in a lot of ways, multitudes of them. Are you going to grow into a 5th dimensional space of well-being, ease, co-creation, cooperation, dignity, and all the isms fall away? There are no bad people in a way. You just kind of figure out, okay, how do we work together? That's kind of a 5th dimensional space. That's a challenge for a lot of people. So you're going to see over the next number of years kind of stratas of consciousness be created. There'll be a 5th dimensional space. There'll be another space over here and another space over here. And they're all going to have different levels of energetic constructs. And so let me just leave it there, because we can take it into other areas, but it gets to be, well, what do you mean, and does that mean? And so I'm going to try to stay away from that. if that's okay.
I have a question that has been with me a long time. And it's like I have a distant relative, but I don't know who he really is.
Move Mike a little further back. Good, yeah, good, thanks.
Echo?
That's better,
All
yeah.
right, do I need to repeat
No,
that?
no, you're good, no, it's good.
So, Yeshua ben Joseph. I'd like to know more about the boy who turned into the man, and maybe a different story than is told about him.
Too big of an answer.
All right.
Too big of an answer. Yeah. And and he would tell you, he is telling you, yeah, I got it. Didn't matter what he did as a boy. Just like you. You bumped around, you had experiences, you learned, you had all kinds of things. And he progressed into his life path. And there is levels of that reporting of his life path that are very inaccurate. There's some that are accurate but very understated. And there's aspects, there's a piece that is a massive piece that has been left out of the story. And that piece is the energy of Mary Magdalene. Huge piece. Huge piece. And so all of that in there's another one of these Edison's and Tesla kind of circumstances. If certain aspects of that had happened, we wouldn't be sitting here at all, we would be someplace else. But what is really clear, and you'll hear him say at least 4 times in the recordings and the conversations that I have with him that you're going to listen to, is I did not do what I came to do. I didn't accomplish that numbers of things that I came to do. I didn't fail. Just the density was so thick it didn't come to pass. But you will do what I did not do. And it's not some biblical statement, although it's really clearly a biblical statement. He's really saying the energy is so different right now. And you got 2012. You got a huge consciousness on the planet you that is able to bring forth these changes that were not able to be brought forth then. And so, but he really is not interested in talking about the boy and the journey and the stories. And I mean, one of the things that he did, he went all around the world. In those days he disappeared. And his teachers in India were spectacular. And so there's a, oh no, I won't go there. Okay. Got it. So maybe one more question and then we'll come to a stopping place.
My question is that there's a lot of people out there who are in severe pain emotionally and physically. And it's not that they don't want to get out of it, it's that they don't know how to, especially nowadays. See, a lot of us have been in the spiritual world for many, many, many years, but these are people who have beliefs that don't hold up to what they need. What advice could you give these people?
Well, see, just like I've been saying to you, there's an alignment of knowing yourself, and then there's concentric circles that move out from that particular alignment. And so out here it's like, hey, yeah, nice to see you, and life's good, and there's a lot of subjectivity, and there's a lot of denial. And there's a lot of just simple, I'm going to say the word ignorance, not pointing at anybody, a lack of information about how do I get out of this situation I'm in. And then you look at the game that we play in the third dimension, everybody's channeled. Well, this is work. This is the food that we put on your table. Is it any good? No, but we put it on your table. This is how you understand yourself. This is acceptable. This isn't acceptable. Very channeled. The nature of your creativity, when you look at people generally, they're not creative. They've been dumbed down and restricted and limited and basically labeled, you know, what lower income, black, brown, white, red. I mean, labels. And that label, just like the caste system in India, says this is where you play. It's not as restricted as the caste system, and it is more restricted than the caste system. There's things like what we call in the United States freedoms. Go to Russia, they have far more freedom than we do in the United States. You just haven't been told you have freedoms and you believe it. But try not filing your income tax. You know, try driving on the wrong side of the road. Try just simply stepping up and owning yourself in terms of managing your bank account on your terms. Oh, I'm sorry, here's the box, this is how we do this. So all that sense of freedom in the United States is really very mythical. But we just go along with, so when everybody goes along with that, and it's misaligned with their creative nature, with their ability to experience themselves, you have an educational system. You know who started the education system in the United States? True story, Henry Ford. And the reason he started the education system, he needed people to be able to count 2, 3, 4 bolts that needed to be put in the 2, 3, 4 holes. And they needed to read, put the bolt in the hole. Reading, writing, arithmetic. Henry Ford. Very successful. And then the Carnegies picked up on it, and the Rockefellers picked up on it, and basically tailored it into what we are. So when I look at an individual personality, wonderful people, but very restricted, most people in the world, and you begin to play in that space. We're going to do a conference in Switzerland in May, and one of the things I'm really interested in going to do there is you've got generations of war in the ground. And think about the whole history of Europe. Then you take World War II, and the people that basically look your age, their age over there, where did they come from? They came from parents that just lived that war. One generation separation is where I'm talking, like we're all Europe. That energy is so defined in a lot of people's space as limitations that stepping up and saying freedom is a challenge. So it's really exciting from my point of view, going over and working that energy of limitation based on that level of suppression. So to answer the question about people, that's what you're watching. Wonderful people. None of that is, well, people aren't smart. That's not the statement. Wonderful people, very kind people, very generous people. The average person is more than happy to help somebody else. But were they given the opportunity to really be capable and explosive in excitement? No.
So how can
Very
we
conditioned.
help? How can we-
You are helping. You are really helping. Get your freedom. Become free. Begin to recognize that there's no handouts. It's not a matter of writing everybody a check and they'll get better. That doesn't work. How do you basically say, hello, what do you need? In a manner that allows you to hold the light in their presence and assist. You know, I made a decision that every time I see somebody sticking their hand out homeless, I'll put a $5 bill in their pocket. $5 bill. Well, that's a lot. To them, it's a lot. To me, it's a lot. Can they do more with that $5 bill than I can? Oh, yes. Does that make sense? So it's just in my reality, I try to always have $5 bills because I never have any idea who I'm going to bump into at the post office parking lot. Is that a big deal on my part? No. Is that something where, see, there's a lot of ways to help people, and I don't mean give them money. I mean, hello, can I give you something? There was a guy it was like, here, I have a half a turkey sandwich, would you like it? Yes. Great, here it is. Have a good day. So there are lots of ways you can do things, and not just physical, and not handouts, those kind of things, but how can I help you? What do you need? You can make a lot of differences, particularly energy-wise.
Talk about the free webinar.
Thursday, okay. So for those of you listening and anybody else, there's a free webinar on Thursday, 6 o'clock, 5 o'clock Pacific time. Title is, Dorothy, you're not in the third dimension anymore. So how do you put yourself into a place where you think from the heart and you see from the brain and you have the courage to simply step into your own space? What can you do that allows you not to be in the energy of the conditionality and basically step out of it and have a sense of yourself? Really basic pieces in terms of mastering alchemy, but you can't do that enough. So for all of you in Facebook world, come do that. And did we do a morning conversation?
I don't know. I don't know if we have one or not.
Okay, there may be a morning conversation. But we'll so, for all of you in Facebook world, thank you. Hope this was helpful. It's fun to do this live every once in a while. For all of you here, go home, go to bed, or go to your hotel room, go to bed, and we'll come and play again tomorrow morning.
Thank you.